everybody, and welcome to the Questionable Album Club. On the panel tonight, I remember last time that I didn't introduce anybody at all. We just went straight around. So I'm just going to introduce everybody tonight. Tonight we have Marcus Kingwell. Hello, Marcus.
Hello, good evening.
We've got Andrew Steen. Steenie. Thank you, Steenie.
Good evening.
For his second appearance with us tonight, Simon Ward. Mr. Simon Ward. Hello, Simon.
Hello.
It was Steenie, because Steenie, was it your reward? We're calling it a reward, aren't we?
Yeah, I think I notch up a hat trick of appearances.
Exactly, a hat trick of appearances, which meant you got to choose the album. So your choice was Scream, which was the controversial album from Chris Cornell, the late Chris Cornell, from 2009, which is his kind of pop album. His kind of a collaboration with Timbaland, which was very much not the sort of music that he was associated with. It was quite controversial and split opinion, and sent him straight back to Soundgarden straight afterwards. So, Steenie, do you want to just explain why you chose this and a bit of history with you and this artist?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, this album to me seemed like an ideal choice, given the kind of brief of the Questionable Albums Club. It's very much an outlier in his career. I mean, he's really known for his all-out rock performances with Soundgarden and Audio Slave, and his solo career as well. Sort of, he never really broke that kind of mold. And if you listen to Soundgarden as particularly, they're very much became his band, and you hear his stamp over the whole thing as their sort of career progressed. And this record doesn't sound like it, a lot of the time doesn't sound like it's a Chris Cornell album at all, other than the voice. And predictably, it fell on pretty stony ground when it was released for the majority of Soundgarden fans. Some critics, actually, I think, were semi-favourable towards it, and some actively seem to like it. Reading a couple of reviews, certainly the poppier people who, poppier online journalists were more favourably inclined, predictably, to it. But yeah, it seems to me that this was ideal fodder for us to talk about, because it really isn't anywhere near where you'd expect Chris Cornell to have landed. Anywhere near. In 2009, I think this record came out, and it was, I think it was preceded by, simultaneously released 5 or 6 singles, all with videos or something as well, digitally.
Yeah,
it's
prepare
very
everybody.
sort of zeitgeisty, I suppose, at the time, where all of a sudden you can do that and just push stuff out, and there's no need to press it up and get it through the plant and get the sleeves made or any of that. You've got all these videos. It seemed to almost like a reinvention. In some ways, I suppose.
Do you think it was a cynical reinvention, kind of like, right, I'm gonna try and leap cynically into the mainstream music?
I thought at the time I thought that. I did think, well, he's tried everything. Soundgarden was one thing that finished him. I think when did they actually break up? Down on the Upside was the last album, sort of 96, 97. And then Audio Slave had been okay, but it was basically Rage Against the Machine with him singing, and it was, some good songs in there. But I was thinking, well, maybe he's getting to the point where it's like, if I don't, I'm getting old. He's pushing, I think at the time, probably 40. In his early 40s, thinking, if I don't become a proper pop star soon, it's never going to happen. I'm never going to be able to make a video bumping and grinding with girls in 10 years' time. No one's going to buy it. But at the moment, I've still got my hair, still got my looks.
Okay, so you think it was like a genuine pitch?
That's what I thought. But then researching this record, having to do it for today, I've actually found that he seemed to consider it a genuine meeting of musical minds with Timbaland, and the feeling was mutual. I think they both liked the fact that apparently it was drummed up in 6 weeks.
Yeah,
and they were just sort of sparking off each other and making this record. And it's without, I don't want to sort of spoil too much about the analysis.
Yeah, hold on, Steenie. Can you hold off your analysis?
I'll definitely hold fire. Yeah, I was going to say, I don't want to say too much about that, But I think having actually listened to it, I think I've revised my opinion of it as being an act of cynicism, I'll say. I think there's some genuine, honest intent in there when I've listened, you know, whether it's successful or not, we'll find out. But I think I've started to think perhaps he wasn't, you know, quite as market minded and as much of a sellout as the sort of teenage me would have thought. Having if I'd have gone forward, sort of 10 years into the future or 15 years into the future as a teenage Soundgarden fan, and heard this record, I would have been utterly appalled. But and questioned his motives unreservedly. But I'm a more mature man now. I'm less partisan.
And there's the proof. Marcus, were you aware of this when it came out? Were you horrified by this?
I wasn't. I didn't know anything about it. I was not really a big Chris Cornell fan. Well, not really at all. So obviously aware of him, and much to your giggle last week, Seb, I was the one that liked Audio Slave, and you clearly think they're a load of rubbish. But anyway, that's one side. I just want to say, Stingy, I think this is an excellent choice. It fits the brief of Questionable Album Club like to a T. So spot on, including being annoyingly long. I mean, it just goes on
Really
absolutely forever, doesn't it? Like an hour and 10 or something.
I felt the need to apologise in the group chat, actually. Sorry for springing like such a monster on everyone.
Well, it's a sort of a general bugbear of mine in that, you know, for many, many years, probably, I don't know, since the LP was invented, musicians were making music in a 40 to 45-minute format and really picking the songs, you would hope, as carefully as possible. And then you get a new format comes out with CDs and it all goes over the hour. And no, you don't really want it. Just be a bit harder with the, you know, editor's pen, I would say.
Do you know why? Do you know? This is a trivia question, pub quiz question. Do you know why the CD is the length that it is?
No idea.
I think I know the answer to this.
Go on.
It's to fit one of Beethoven's symphonies on, isn't it?
That's right. It's the exact length of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. Philips Audio did. They thought, well, no one's going to want anything longer than this. So they thought that was the perfect.
At that point,
so that's why. So it's Beethoven's fault that we have all these fucking 20-track albums.
Ridiculous. Yeah, ridiculous.
Anyway, so Marcus.
We'll get this album, and it's already got the contradictions there immediately apparent, because you got the cover, him in most virile mode, jumping, smashing guitar. It's like full-on rock stuff. He's in his t-shirt, hair's flowing, looking good. And the title, it's Scream. It's like another kind of full-on energy rock and rollers thing. So is that a little trick to lure us in? Is it a sop to the hard rocking fans who aren't going to get that when you uncover it? I don't know, but that's a little teaser there, which was on the surface. We had talked about, I think last week, just in the tiny little bit of intro, that this was maybe a pop album, but I don't think it really is a pop album either, because when you think of what pop music's really meant to stand for, which is short-term, creative, catchy, high-selling singles. That's how I think of pop music. It's much less of an album music format. None of these feel like chartable singles in their own right. They're taking some of the instrumentation and the production format of pop music very generally, but it doesn't feel like a pop album. So it raised lots of questions for me listening to it. One, which is, why did he pick this style? And the style, the only thing I can relate it to, not being a kind of a huge connoisseur of pure pop, but we've got a copy of Madonna's Music in the house from 2000, and that's got a similar production feel, but that's 9 years earlier than this. So it's sort of, why has he gone for that kind of electronica mix of stuff?
Well, Marcus, I think it's Timbaland. I think we can safely say it's considered a kind of collaborative album. I think obviously they wrote songs together over this quite concentrated period of time, and Timbaland is obviously doing all the sonics, and he's obviously thinking, here's a song written on a piano or a keyboard. Let's put this sample in here and a bit with this beat, and it's clearly kind of on the fly electronic. So I don't think it was a decision to kind of make a genre album. It was just Timbaland has got his tools, which don't include guitars and drums and basses, and Cornell's got his tool, which is rock voice.
Let's
fucking try and sell it to the kids.
Okay, I take that, but I just think also the prime mover in this, I would have thought, is Chris, and he's the one that's taken the decision before his to collaborate with somebody, with anybody. And there was creative non-rock music, you know, really interesting around that time. Not necessarily to everybody's taste, but you had, you know, drum and bass was still pretty big. Dubstep was coming alive. The sort of trip hop thing was still kicking around. He could have done those routes, the more sort of creative but non-rock avenues. But,
yeah, but Marcus, I think the whole point of what Steenie said was that he was aiming for the commercial jugular. No matter how it came about, it was a natural thing. It was a natural. Oh, let's just write some stuff together. Yeah. Timbaland was if Timbaland was producing it at that time, it was going to sell a lot.
It's going to sell
a lot of records. So it was as close as you can to a bankable creative project as possible. So I think you have to kind of have some slightly cynical eyes as to kind of like what Timbaland would have monetarily brought to the project.
I'm just in my naivety, I'm hoping that wasn't the case, that he was choosing a particular oeuvre with all this, with this type of music. Anyway, that to one side, I actually enjoyed listening to it, and I didn't think I would. And I was coming back to, I like the complexity of the songs, I like the way they were arranged, I like there was catchy stuff, there was hooks. You know, it's not the sort of thing I would particularly want to spend my hard-earned cash on, but to spin it through 3 times over the last few days at an hour and 10 minutes, I had a good time listening to it. There's a couple that made me wince, but we'll come on to those later on. So that'll probably do for my kickoff.
Yeah, you've got a cheeky little smile there, Marcus. A little kind of like a cheeky little kind of like, you know. That's enough of that. Simon, do you like Chris Cornell? Did you like Soundgarden? Did you like Audio Slave? Did you feel betrayed, devastated by this, or did you like it? Are you like Marcus? Are you feeling a little bit saucy?
I am feeling a little bit saucy.
I knew it. So
I'm with Marcus. I don't think this was cynical at all. I think I'm guessing we've all read the same Wikipedia entry and we've read the same bits and pieces that we found, right?
Wikipedia on this podcast.
We've all done the bare bones research, right? And yes. I think somewhere in amongst that, it said that they went into the studio to do something else. They were going to do some remixes of some other material or something, and they ended up writing some music, and that they then just stayed in the studio for 6 weeks and wrote this album. And I don't think it was cynical at all. I think that he probably, I mean, I was thoroughly bored of everything Chris Cornell had ever done by that stage. I'm sure he was too. But I also think it's not surprising. I don't know why you'd expect him to be drawn towards underground British electronic music. You know, the Soundgarden are a very mainstream, all-American stadium rock band. I mean, there's nothing.
Not stadium.
Oh, they are. I mean, spiritually, there's nothing countercultural about them. They're just a big, squealy rock band, especially Chris Cornell in particular. I mean, without him, they could potentially have gone in a different route. And the evidence of that is that Rage Against the Machine made that almighty first record that, you know, is of its kind, unparalleled, and yet you take Zap de la Rocha out and you put Chris Cornell in, and they turn into the most pedestrian band in the world because he just does this horrible squealy metal vocal over the top that
100%
that pseudo soul-y kind of thing. And so I was aware of Soundgarden. I mean I quite like Black Hole Sun. I used to work with a guy who played Super Unknown a lot at work, and so I have an irrational dislike of that album, barring that song. Audio Slave I listened to very briefly and came to the conclusion that I've just discussed. Timbaland I didn't know at all before I listened to this record, so I had a listen to a little bit of Timbaland and I discovered I don't like him very much either. But this record isn't bad. It's not good, but it isn't bad. So I think, like, Chris Cornell has kind of tempered some of his more irritating grab your crotch and squeal type tendencies which is pleasing. And every now and then Timbaland puts him through some processing, so you can't tell it's a rock twat at all, which is perfect. And Timbaland, based on the limited exposure, I mean, I didn't do a great deal of listening to Timbaland because it's not really my kind of thing. But it feels like Timbaland has met him in the middle as well. And so, I think it is, to some degree, what they thought it was, a meeting of musical minds creating a new thing in the middle. And like some of the songs are, I mean, I didn't want to turn them off as quickly as I wanted to turn off Audio Slave, for example. So, yeah, it's not a bad record. And it was only when we got to about track 9 or 10 that, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I haven't listened to all of it all the way through, because by about halfway through, I've lost interest every time, and I sort of skipped through the final few tunes. And actually, you talked about the format thing. It struck me when I was listening to it, and I don't know if this is right because my memory's not very good, but if that was in the middle of CD world, it feels like a CD album in all the songs that. The better songs are at the beginning, and it gets worse and worse and worse as you get towards the end, until that dreadful song, that dreadful kind of blues
one,
country, whatever the fuck that is, at the end comes on.
2 Drink Minimum.
That's the fellow, yeah. And because I looked, I don't know which version you listened to. I listened to the UK version, which adds a few extra unnecessary tracks afterwards.
Oh,
I stopped there.
I listened to the UK version, assuming it'd be a shorter version. We got the longer version.
Well, there's tracks after whatever that was, 2 Drink Minimum, and that's the last track. That's a hidden track apparently on the original.
Oh,
I think probably the idea with that was like as a nice little surprise for any Soundgarden fans that had actually made it to the end of the record. But there you go. Here's a proper song for you at the end. But that's my initial take on it.
Okay. I'm very similar to you actually, Simon. I never really liked Soundgarden. I always smell the rat with his rockisms, with his kind of shirt off. Ooh, yeah, baby, like a Poundland or a plant. So in love with himself and his hair and his little facial hair and his. But yeah, I remember when we saw him, Marcus. We saw him on the bill at Hyde Park with Black Sabbath and Motorhead and Faith No More. And
I wasn't there that day.
Oh, okay. You were there in spirit, my friend.
A different we, yeah.
Anyway, they were on the bill there, and it
was he solo then, Seb, or was he?
No, that was Soundgarden. That was what he did. He went back to Soundgarden after this. After this was such a commercial and critical failure, he went back to Soundgarden, and they did the festivals and whatever. And then they made an album. I think I never listened to it because I don't like him. But it was just anyway. It was all mid-paced, all minor key. It was all a dirge. These kind of self-pitying minor key dirges. And I've never got on with it. I don't like Black Hole Sun. I get it. It's a kind of, at least it's got a tune, it's got a chorus, but I don't like him. I just don't like the whole posturing rock bullshit of it. Don't like that kind of voice, whereas Ronnie James Dio, I know they have a similar sort of thing. Ronnie James Dio's voice, I love. It's just, for me, it's just this beautiful, rich rainbow. You got to say rainbow, haven't you? But it's just something wonderfully just, whereas he's trying to do the same thing, but there's something cynical about him. There's something I don't like about Chris Cornell's voice. I'm a rock god, and I just, anyone who's like, I'm a rock god, I just don't like. So I don't like, never really liked Soundgarden. Audio Slave I thought was pathetic for exactly what you said, Simon. And I've never heard any of the solo stuff. But again, this, I didn't think it was that bad. I wanted to hate it. The first song, when it goes, the beat comes in, plinky, 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 it's like, oh God, it's just awful. But actually, it's all right. I thought there's quite, it's sonically quite imaginative, decent production. I didn't like it particularly, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it would. As someone else was saying, Marcus, you were saying, I think about the songs where he doesn't do the rock thing. Sometimes there's the incongruity of like a kind of modern hip hop, R&B, pop-y production with kind of rock voice in there somewhere. It just doesn't work at all. So I like the ones. There's one I've got here, Ground Zero. It's like a sort of soul R&B song, and he just sings it in a normal voice, and that kind of works as a normal song because he's not trying to be Chris Cornell. So I thought, there's a power pop song, Climb Up the Walls, but no, I think you can kind of tell that the album was written quite quickly because none of the songs develop particularly. They go from one sound vibe into the other. I quite like this. We all read the same Wikipedia page, and that the whole thing was conceived as a kind of headphones album, that all the songs link into each other. There's no gaps between the songs, and the segues between songs is quite clever. You think, oh, I like this bit, and then you realise after the fourth or fifth time that actually it's just segues into the next song, and it's not a new bit in the song, and they haven't done anything imaginative. They've just started the next song.
Can't tell
So
you how angry that made me when I worked out that's what they were doing. I was like, I was beside myself. I was like, "Oh, you're trying to manipulate how I listen to this, are you? I don't like that."
yeah,
They've got like what I thought was sort of an outro or a coda to most
Yeah, but it's
songs.
not. It's the intro to
It's
the
sort of
next song.
but the kind of whatever it's called, the marker, the electronic marker that says you're now on track 3,
Yeah.
comes later.
Yes,
yeah.
I thought they fucked it up. I thought whoever pressed it had just put all the markers in the wrong place.
Well,
Like about
maybe
40
they
seconds
had,
too
and
far
maybe
on.
that's just what happens. Yeah, it's gone
No,
out
but
that way. It's meant to
but
change.
what I imagine what they said was, rather than finishing the album where that song finishes, if we start the next one, it might kind of, they might not press pause. They might just go, oh, let's hear what's happening here. And I think it's quite a clever process. And it was only after 4 or 5 I thought, oh, this is actually, I was thinking, oh, this song's really boring. It doesn't develop. There's no bridge. There's nothing. It's just like fucking skip. And it goes, something interesting happens. I'm repeating myself, but it just kept happening, and that's what it was. I think it's quite anyway. So yeah, I thought it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. Steenie, what did you actually think of it?
Do you know what? I'm the same. I think after I got over my initial irritation with it, I listened to it in the wrong place to start with. I listened to it in the car to start with, which is sometimes a good place to listen to music. But the problem was, I was listening and I was like, Christ, this first song has gone on forever. And I then realized I was actually on track 3 already, because the actual beat doesn't really change that much. The pace of the first 3 songs is almost exactly the same, and the beat doesn't really change. And the segue thing, I was just thinking, oh, it's just going on for months. This is still song number 1. And there was a bit of that, and it was because I was in the car, I wasn't getting any of the sort of subtleties of the production, because when you actually listen to it in headphones, you hear more than just the beat and the vocals, and there are interesting little things happening, which I was surprised to find myself enjoying it more the second time round, where I was thinking, oh, this is going to be a chore now to have to listen to that again, really. I mean, there were things that I really liked about it. I like the fact that when you're sort of stripped away everything, because I am a fan of Chris Cornell's singing. I'm in the minority, but I do like his voice, and I like the fact that at times you can hear it very clearly on the starker sort of production. And I like the fact that there's not lots of instrumentation getting in the way at certain points, and you can hear his voice properly. And what I really thought was quite fun was that segueing. It didn't annoy me that as much as it could have, but I thought the same thing. I was like, someone's messed up where they've put because there's a couple where actually it's a genuinely short piece of music where they've thought we haven't been able to work this into a song, so we'll just stick it there as an interlude. And there's one that I really liked that was like that. It was very short and it had some electric guitar and some like choir going and some weird voices. And it reminded me of Superzar by Sabbath off the Sabotage album, which is one of the most over-the-top and pompous songs that Sabbath did, but I very much enjoy it whenever I hear it. And I thought it was quite fun, probably unintentional nod to that. It's funny when you're listening as well with the modern Spotify. You can actually watch the video at the same time, and I did that for a couple of songs, and it made it a far less enjoyable experience than just listening to it.
I did the same. I thought
it
was terrible.
The marriage of the visuals, it sort of cheapens the music, because it does put you in that frame where you're starting to think this is just a pop record, but which is, I say just a pop record, like that's a terrible thing. It's not, but I think it pitches the album lower than I think both of the main creative forces of it would have liked. I don't know. I wonder who the decisions were in making those videos, like how they were shot and whatnot. But yeah, it's still quite a fun listen at times. It's totally not the sort of music, and I don't even know enough about Timbaland's music really to be able to say whether this is a good Timbaland record or a bad Timbaland record, or whether the parts he put in are generic, what he brings to every project or not. From what I've heard just casually on the radio, a lot of that sort of style of R&B with, it's the same beats and it's the same production values. but there were interesting things happening, like funny little details in the song, some things that irritated me. Vocal, the sort of vocal trend of having lots of whoa whoa whoas, like Coldplay do it all the time. It drives me around the bloody twist. But it's that, you just have a lot of whoa whoas woeing a melody away, and there's loads of that going on in the background. And yeah, that sort of bugged me a little bit. But I was the one thing that, because obviously we've read this Wikipedia article, the illusion that Chris Cornell makes is to sort of Night of the Opera, I think, and
oh yeah,
Dark Side of the Moon.
That was bizarre. That was weird.
And it is they're weird touchstones for a record that sounds nothing like either of them. And
yeah, you call it psychedelic, some sort of psychedelic.
There's very little psychedelic about it. That's the thing. I would have liked it to have been more psychedelic. I think a collaboration with someone with more of a psychedelic worldview might have worked even better. There are like psychedelic hip hop artists and producers that make like really interesting stuff, and I think that it might have worked better. But obviously, Chance. I mean, I don't think he actively went out seeking a producer to do something different. It does sound like a kind of organic thing, that contrary to what I thought in 2009, I think, when I first heard it. And I only ever heard the lead single and was just like, what the hell? This is mental. I saw the video, just didn't get it. And having listened to it, I still think that first song is a bit weird, that sort of chorus, this bitch ain't a part of me. And you're like, they don't sound like words that Chris Cornell would have written. He might have been angry at the time, but it sounds like the kind of like, I don't know what that was slightly, what that's about. But yeah, I enjoyed it, and I think there are a couple of tracks in the middle, like Ground Zero, I quite liked. And I'll just have to refer to what have I done with it? Refer to the track listing to jog my memory, but I thought
it is genuinely perhaps the most uninspiring list of song titles. Part of me, Sweet Revenge, Get Up, Never Far Away, Take Me Alive, Long Gone. It's the most will this fucking do. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just as a list of song titles.
These song titles, when you get a pub band with ideas above its station and they've done loads of covers and they say, and now we're going to do one of our own. This one's called Climbing Up the Walls.
Yeah,
it's
so true.
It's kind of.
We'll just write that down.
My mate had has a collection of set lists that he's collected from stages whenever he's played a gig, and some of the bands take their set list and he just collects them just for the amusement of reading other bands' song titles. And exactly as Marcus has said, this one's called Scream. Next one is Sweet Revenge. Dave wrote this. But yeah, it's and all of the song titles in that sort of not particularly Soundgarden-y or Chris Cornell way. All the song titles feature heavily in the songs, which is something that's very un-Seattle generally, isn't it? Having a song with the chorus that actually has the title of the song in it, that was a bit of a no-go back in the early 90s.
I think all of the Seattle has been drained out of him by this.
Yeah, I think this might, and I totally get what Simon said. I think that he's bored of the rock thing. He wants to do something different, and it is really fun. I've lent a hand to a mate who makes very pure sort of throwaway pop, like intentionally tries to make very commercial, silly tunes. And he's asked me to play guitar on a few of them, and it's really good fun. It is really fun just doing that, and I totally get why he felt like this was a something fun and interesting to get involved with.
Bit like Eddie Van Halen and his solo on Michael Jackson.
Well, this is kind of what I always get asked to do. That's basically, can you do the Beat It solo 50 times? But yeah. So I have to oblige, but I don't mind doing that. It's fun. It's fun. But there's also lots of other stuff, it's can you do this Nile Rodgers thing? Can you do this? And it's always a hoot because it's not something I'd normally do. So
and because your ego's not in the game, Stephen, so it's like,
well, that's it. I've got nothing to lose by. I'm just the anonymous like shredding going on. So there's that, yeah, that there is that, but it's just I totally get how he felt when he went into this, and he'd come up with an idea. Yeah, just tossed off a few songs to Timbaland to remix, and they end up saying, "Oh, I've got this idea," and before you know it, they've got nearly 70 minutes of music.
Yeah, Jesus.
But,
Marcus,
yeah.
what did you think of the voice, the Timbaland Cornell voice?
Yeah, there's a real clash there, isn't there? What irritated me was the vocal treatments. I thought that was completely needless, and it was just to sort of try and contemporize Chris's rock posturing. I'm with you with his voice, Seb, in that it just doesn't quite do it for me. It's in black and white and it should be in color. You know, there's
weird,
just there's something and it's also the way the sound they've recorded on here, which I think is actually naturally his tone, but it's sort of thin and reedy in places, and that's sort of frustrating because you know what he wants to go for, and of course we get a taste of it. The song I really want to talk about is 2 Drink Minimum, which when it opens, I'm thinking, oh, we're really hearing his voice now, like the full range, the color, the timbre of his voice. This is really exciting. And then it completely shoots itself in the foot because it brings in every single blues cliche or rock blues, whatever you want to call it, 6/8 time rim shots. You can almost like it's a checklist. Oh, maybe we'll have some swirling organ. Yes, we've got the swirling organ. And I'm just waiting for, like, you know, my very good friend Slash is going to do the solo next. And somehow we miss what would have been called the blistering solo or the soaring solo.
Steenie to do it. That's why Steenie, you could have stepped in.
That's what I should have been doing. Well, I was disappointed. I'll tell you what I was disappointed about that, because you talk about the blues cliches. A bit train spottery, but that harmonica, they should have had a diatonic harmonica. It's a chromatic. It's like Stevie Wonder flourishes. It's too busy.
Oh, yeah.
Should have kept
I'm
it.
waiting for you to spot that. It's just one of those things. It's it really grated me, that wrong type of harp in there.
It's a disaster.
That song was just really funny.
Yeah.
And it's also, I mean, I hope the guy, and I'm not mocking here, if he had a drink problem, you know, that's a big deal. But it just almost sounds like that he's singing about a drink problem because it's expected of the genre. And I don't know, that's just an awful thing as well, if that's going down that route. But then the next song I really, really enjoyed, Lost Cause, which for some reason it says non-LP version, because I think I couldn't find another version of it on.
Yeah, I was surprised by that. I looked back and I couldn't figure out why that.
But maybe non-LP version is genuinely part of its title. But I really, really like that song. I like that the drum beat that it starts off with, or the sound, which is really, it's a simple beat, but it's you know, straight, like loads of drums or hand claps going on at one time. And I suppose that's a rock song without having any guitars in it. It's a kind of woo-woo rocky kind of thing. And I thought that was really, really enjoyable song. So kind of curious that, as you say, the album was very, very samey all the way through, and then varied for whatever reason right at the end, and they're kind of bolt-on songs. Did somebody say those were the ones which are on the British version only?
The last one, the Lost Cause, is not part of the album proper, according to
right. Okay, my favorite song, and it's not part of them. Oh well. So yeah, that's really it. As I say, my original comments still apply. I enjoyed it. I think it's probably benefited from the passage of time, because to listen to it in 2009 in the context of what else was going on, what he had done before, our expectations of him as a rock singer, I could see the impact it would have had been overly negative. Now I'm seeing it just more as music floating around that I played this weekend for the first time, and yeah, I thought it was enjoyable on the whole, but glad I didn't spend any money on it. That's pretty much.
Well, don't spend any money on anything these days, do they?
Really, yeah.
Simon, as a recent convert to the blues, thanks to the Question of Album Club, what were your thoughts on 2 Drink Minimum? Did it?
by then I'd I just kind of skipped through the previous 4 or 5 tracks, listening to like skipping them to find, and so it was a pleasant surprise that it didn't sound like everything else that I'd just listened to until it sort of started, and then I turned it off. I think I can't add anything to what Marcus said. It is like blues by numbers, like painting blues by numbers, and I think your thing about he did have a problem with drink. I suspect he was a smackhead as well, because he's got that kind of about the smackheads have. And
what? Sorry.
This anyway. Can I nick your money? Anyway, so he'd been sober since 2003. Apparently, I was reading something else somewhere else. I didn't know that he'd committed suicide a couple of years ago. But he apparently, because he relapsed, and he'd been sober since 2003. His ex-wife says in the interview. So I think that there's a special group of addictive rock people who really should stick with the drugs and not get clean, because when they do, they make really bad decisions, and I think he might be one of those people. I mean, at least he was doing, Soundgarden weren't for me, but lots of people liked them. He had a successful, coherent thing going on, got himself sober, and started making shit like this. So I don't know, from a commercial point of view, I think it was a backward step. I actually don't think it's a bad record. There was a few tracks that I didn't like. Ground Zero, I thought that was a particular low point of the record. I liked the one before it, Get Up, quite enjoyed. My kind of criteria for whether it was a good track on this album or not was all the ones where they put in an unnecessary rock guitar can go. Like, it's just, I mean, even if you like, I love a big guitar, but not in the middle of that. Not when you've just done quite a nice R&B kind of pop song. Don't just dump a guitar on top of it. And I preferred it because I don't like his voice. I preferred it when his voice was least recognizable as Chris Cornell. So when Timbaland was doing those kind of warbly effects that an auto tune and all that kind of stuff, I quite liked that. I thought, I don't know if there's any of you ever drunk in a Vodka Revolution bar. Do you know those bars? It's a chain of bars.
Years ago, many years. There wasn't one. Was the one in Winchester, wasn't there? I think.
I don't know. I used
in the square, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There might have. There were quite a lot in London when I lived there at the time that they were a thing. And but I'm thinking actually of the one in Cardiff. I worked in Cardiff for a little while, and the Vodka Revolution was next door to my office, and it was very popular. So if you haven't been to one, it's kind of neon lights, and it's very popular with the after work crowd, and they specialise in vodka and cocktails, and it's sort of like upmarket tat. And I just, for some reason, I used to go in there after work sometimes on my own because I didn't have anything to do because I was staying away, and it'd be empty, and the barman would just be wandering about, and I can just imagine the barman putting this record on at that point on a Wednesday evening when the bar's empty, because he likes Soundgarden, but he's not allowed to play Soundgarden because the office people don't like it. So this is the closest he can get to listening to something that he likes. And I guess the other observation I had at one point is this kind of folded in quite interestingly. I was listening to Take Me Alive, which I think is about coming up for halfway through the record. And I kind of imagined it would be, that's probably what Nine Inch Nails have sounded like for the last 20 years or so. I mean, I haven't listened to Nine Inch Nails since Pretty Hate Machine, and I didn't like that very much. But then I noticed in the encyclopedia entry that has been referenced that Trent Reznor apparently publicly said that Chris Cornell had embarrassed himself with this record.
And then apologised because then he wanted to go on tour.
Because he wanted to go on tour with him, yeah. But so I thought that was interesting that the lead singer and songwriter from Nine Inch Nails criticised Chris Cornell from making a record that sounds exactly like I imagine Nine Inch Nails sound like. I mean, look, it seemed a bit close to the bone, perhaps, that Chris Cornell had pointed out that this is basically what you do, Trent. I'm making one of your records. So and the final thing I'd say about the songs in themselves was that I might be wrong, but I think the title track has a sample of the drum fill from In the Air Tonight. And
Oh,
whether
that ding,
Yeah.
ding, yeah, or it copies it.
I think it does, and whether I'm right or not, I'm going to assume it does, which means that there will be penalties come scoring time. That's a -10 deduction immediately.
Interesting. We've never had a minus score because I sort of banned it Gibson several times.
Oh no, he's not going to get. I'm not. I want to no spoil. I'm just saying. I mean, it's a good record. This.
I'm just saying. I'm just saying. I'm just a little shot across your bows. Steve Gibson, funnily enough, has threatened minus scores on the pod before. But we've always banned him from doing minus scores because then it's like, well, if you allow minus scores, you can have quantum scores, you can have it's got to be between 1 and 100. So I'm not saying you are going to go negative, but and I appreciate your principle, but I'm just saying
I'm just saying there'll be penalties. I'm not saying that it will go below 0. Although Steve, I apologise, I tried, mate.
Well, I've got nothing else to add really. I mean, as a listening experience, it sounds nice, doesn't it? I'm not going to just bore everyone by saying, oh, this song, that song. I thought it was okay. I thought his voice, when he's not doing the rock thing, which felt completely appropriate at all times, I just don't like his voice. Don't like anything he's done really. I don't like his whole persona. Just doesn't. There's nothing for me, even in this context. Marcus, you like Audioslave?
I do. You're completely baffled by that. Well, I don't mind really. I just enjoy it.
What Simon said, I thought was perfect. It's the only reason to me Rage Against the Machine worked was because I suppose Tom Morello's radical recasting of the guitar as a sonic machine of terror was one thing, and Zach LaRocca is his beyond kind of parody righteousness. But then you take all that out and you put in Chris Cornell, this kind of chest beating, He-Man. What is there? Did you buy the albums?
I bought it. I paid it over and over. I think it was because what would it be? I was ready for something like that at that point in time because the 90s had been, as we all know, sort of hard rock and metal had really gone. It was taken over by grunge and all that kind of story.
So you were waiting. You were waiting for the next rock thing to come along.
Yes,
you went into hibernation.
This was just right. It just kind of burst through, and I thought, this is really the business. I saw them live too in Hammersmith. Yeah.
Wow. Did you like Velvet Revolver as well?
No, I didn't. I thought they were lousy. I saw them as well in Hammersmith, and they were just terrible. I don't know why I went actually. I went with Owen, and it was just nothing of a gig. And it was one of those situations, probably in the same mode where I had enjoyed Audioslave, and I thought I sort of should also like Velvet Revolver, but it was just didn't work. I thought the songs were all just noisy and poor. And
it's the same sort of thing. Scott Weiland.
It is kind of
the same sort of vibe as Cornell. A bit of a fraud to me.
I mean, I even like Audioslave because the lyrics are full of cliches about
it's awful, just awful,
Preacher Man and all that stuff. And I just thought, oh yeah, this is like I feel like I'm 16 again.
And it's a bit of a side hustle here, but the thing about grunge was it was a response to hair metal, right? In its authenticity, right? And I suppose people like Cobain and Eddie Vedder, Chris Cornell, and Scott Weiland didn't strike me as particularly authentic men.
I would absolutely sign up.
There's a big mistake in that list. So here's a contrary view, because I think grunge as a whole was a terrible genre. Right?
I agree.
But I don't think Nirvana were a grunge band. I think the mistake that people make is to lump Nirvana in with all those other bands were just basically, like you say, the hair metal was out, authentic plaid shirt rock metal was in, and like all those bands were just the 90s version of bands, all the metal bands I didn't like in the 80s.
Yeah.
The Nirvana were a punk band, like a genuine, proper, subversive punk band. And so were Mudhoney. And so were the Melvins. But like Stone Temple Pilots and
I agree.
Soundgarden, and especially that awful Eddie Vedder band.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you. I mean, they're all lumped in one thing because they all wear plaid shirts, but I completely agree with you. Stone Temple Pilots, Pearl Jam, and Soundgarden to me it was just
Screaming Trees, all of that lot. They were all just plodding rock. And
I agree. Well, hence Pavement in Range Life mocking Stone Temple Pilots. Who's the best? The Smashing Pumpkins as well. Fucking even worse, Smashing Pumpkins. Jesus Christ.
I've got a bit of a weak spot for Smashing Pumpkins, but we'll move on.
Yeah, me too. That's a whole other debate.
Oh, I can't be with them.
I can't bear them.
At the time, we're going a bit off topic, but Stone Temple Pilots were viewed with deep suspicion by almost everybody at the time, weren't they? They were like Johnny Come Latelys. They were right on the tail end of it, and they weren't from Seattle even, and they weren't. Like that matters. They were an LA band, weren't they? And they were very, cynical. Just appeared at the right time with a sound that was suspiciously of the moment.
Yeah, well, it's like everybody was set out to sign one of those bands, wasn't it? So the only reason that Embrace had a career is because they happened to be brothers, and Oasis had just come out. The A&R people they follow, they don't lead most of the time.
It's funny, isn't it, how some bands owe their entire career to these sorts of strange things. Like Coldplay owe their entire career to how long it took Radiohead to make the sequel to OK Computer. It's true, isn't it?
Well,
anyway,
got it into a gap. Okay, yeah.
Anyway, I digress. Right, we're going to do scores. Summings up and scores. So, Steenie, because it was your choice, we'll start with you. Summing up if you feel like summing up, or you can just go straight with this.
Summing up. No, I would say that this is one of those albums that I could grow to like probably even more if I felt the urge to listen to it. It's one of those records where I initially didn't think I was going to like it in the slightest. Obviously, my initial revulsion, just mainly because of the video when I first saw it with that sound and everything, it was so incongruous. Nothing seemed to work. And then actually listening to it with fresh ears more than once, and with like you say, the passage of time, it's got. I think time's been kind to it for sure. I think it was an attempt to do something different, and it was an attempt. It was probably noble in its intentions. So I reckon I'd probably give it a 43, maybe quite high.
That is quite high.
High.
That is vertiginously high. Okay.
Well, it's better than English.
I love the way you're talking slowly then. Just sort of talking your way up to that number. Just as your voice rose, I'm just going to drop this in here. Okay, that's good. That's a lock. That is a lock.
That is a high score.
That's like 3 times the entire score that Ingve got.
I just want to restate what I said at the beginning. I think, Steenie, you've picked a blinder here from meeting the criteria of this podcast. Like, it's just spot on for the questionable bit.
I don't expect the same standard to be held.
And in a similar vein to you, but as a non-fan of Chris Cornell, I enjoyed it. It's good, but not great. But I'm going to be more generous in my score. I'm going to give this one a 55. One of my highest scores of all time, I think.
Man. Simon, please.
Responsibility, yeah, okay. Well, given the options that I would probably have, this is up the top of the list of things that I'd like to be on in Vodka Revolution at 6 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon. So I think I wouldn't put it on by choice, but I probably wouldn't be annoyed if it played all the way through and I was in the room. And I get very irritated by music. So, I mean, it has to have a penalty for using that drum fill, but so I'm going to give it 30.
30. Okay, and that's including
a 10-point penalty for
that's including the 10-point deduction.
Yeah. That's taking that in. That's already taken into account. Yeah.
Okay. So well, I now feel I'm marking it too low. I've already got 2 crossed out ones. Shouldn't be
Don't be,
I have to say,
said. It's got to be up here, genuine from you.
There was a bit of peer
By the
pressure. I was originally going to say 25, and I went to 30 because of the peer pressure.
Yeah, I've got 24 crossed out. Then I've got 23 crossed out, and now I'm going to go. I'm just going to go. Oh, I don't know. What do I?
23.5. I admire your finessing by 1 point.
No one cares. That's the thing. I'm going to say. What do I think about? I just thought it's 25. So right. Let me just do my math. So we've got 43 plus 55 plus 30 plus 25 equals 153 divided by 4, which gives us a mean score of 38.25.
Wow.
And while we were talking, I was trying to find the list of the leaderboard, and I can't actually see it. I've got my questionable album club notebook, which is all rather messy. I can't remember exactly what's coming on the leaderboard.
Database there, said.
Yeah, it's all my spreadsheet. In other words, I might have to come back to you on this one.
There's nothing like preparation.
Oh, here we are. Here we are. Okay. What did I say then? 38.25. Okay, that brings us. It brings it in at 38. Oh, just under Tin Machine 2. So number 1 is still Humble Pie with Thunderbox. That was when Steve Webster didn't understand the rules of the game, of course. Drama, yes, 61. Number 2. Number 3, still Slayer, God Hates Us All. Number 4, Joni Mitchell, Dog Eat Dog. Number 5, Grinderman 2. And number 6, Tin Machine 2. And number 7. So this comes in at number 7. Number 7 is Scream by Chris Cornell. So well done, Steenie. You've hit the leaderboard. I don't know whether it's something to be proud of, hitting the leaderboard, or something to be ashamed of. I never know which quite way round it is. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know that that is a better album than Dada by Alice Cooper, though, is it?
That's just below. That's the album
Is
below
it?
that. That comes in at 37.4. I don't know why that scored so low, because that feels like harshly treated after this. Do you know what I mean?
But we can't go back and revise now. It's all been done. What's been done has been done.
Anyway, yeah. So it would have been Mr. Gibson choosing tonight, but it's fallen to me instead. So mine. Talking about quintessential albums that might kind of be valid for this, I think this album was always going to come around in the end, and because of what it is, it's in 2 parts. So I don't know who's actually going to be on the next pod. So anyway, but so I'm putting this into 2 parts for two reasons, because it's an album from 1975 by Lou Reed. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, there's 2 people here who know exactly what's happening here. Marcus, do you know what I'm talking about here?
I haven't.
It's his 5th solo album from 1975. It's an album
Is it Metal Machine Music?
Yes, it is. It's a double album. Double album from 1975. Lou Reed. His 5th solo album is called Metal Machine Music. But because it's a double album, it can be. Some people consider it quite samey. So what I'm saying that people can do is listen to. You can either choose to listen to the entire thing all the way through. But what I would suggest is that you listen to just the first disc or the first 2 sides of Metal Machine Music, and then also listen to there's a kind of classical interpretation of it, which Lou Reed by a German orchestral group called Zeitklatzer, and this version was scored by Ulrich Krieger, and they recorded it twice. They recorded it with Lou Reed in 2007, and then they recorded it after he died without him in 2016. And with entirely acoustic orchestral instruments. So I think even if because the album itself, Marcus, are you familiar with Metal Machine Music?
No, I'm not. I've heard talk of it, but I've never actually sat down and enjoyed the whole thing.
Okay, so it's probably, if you don't want to listen to the entire double album, what I would suggest you listen to the first half of it.
Yeah,
and then kind of juxtapose that against this kind of orchestral interpretation, which was very much conceived with Lou Reed as well. So Lou Reed toured with it as part of it and played in this ensemble as well. So it's an orchestral interpretation of the thing. So So Simon and Steenie, I know you. I presume you are familiar with it. Don't say anything about it, but I presume you're familiar with the record.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I would very much like to be asked back to talk about that. I don't want to prejudice my chances, but I owned a copy when I owned records. It was part of my record collection.
Okay. Have you? Okay. And have either of you heard it? Steenie, I presume you've heard it, or have you heard the this orchestral version?
No, I'm excited about that.
Okay. Just to, the original is on Spotify, but the Zeitkratzer version is not on Spotify, but it's on YouTube. So what I will do is I will send a link to everybody with the YouTube version that I want people to listen to. Okay.
I cannot wait.
Thanks, everybody. That was really fun. Thank you, Steenie. Thanks, Steenie, for your choice, and thank you, Simon, for joining us again. So let's say goodbye. Marcus, thank you, and good night. Thanks, Marcus. Thank you, Steenie.
No, thank you. Take it easy.
And thank you, Simon. And if anyone is still listening, I just remembered I should probably say like and subscribe and that sort of stuff if anybody's listening at all. So thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Question.